Today we're going to finish up our tapestry by creating a header, finishing off all of our tails by weaving them into the structure, and then taking the tapestry off of the loom. Hi there, welcome to Textile Indie YouTube channel. My name is Brittany. If you're new here, welcome in. We're working on a tapestry weaving series, so check the description below for all of the previous videos in this series. If you're an old friend, welcome back. Glad to have you. We are going to finish out our tapestry today, which is an exciting step in the process because we'll see it from on the loom to an item we can hang on the wall or use for some other purpose. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that the cartoon that we use to create this tapestry is in PDF format in the description below and on my website, Textile Indie. So if you want to follow along with these videos and weave your own tapestry using the techniques that I taught throughout this series, you can print that out and follow along and experiment with your own tapestry weaving process. Now, without further ado, let's get started in weaving the header that's going to finish off our weaving structure. For this tapestry, the base of the tapestry, we started out at the beginning of the series with a header, which is a number of different weaving techniques to create a segment in the weaving that then will get folded to the back of the tapestry. We'll stitch it down and it'll finish off our tapestry edge with a nice woven edge. We're going to repeat that process on the upper section here. So I'm going to reset my loom. We're going to start out with some sumac. So grab your natural colored yarn and cut a length that's double the width of your warp with a little bit of extra for a tail. For sumac, you're going to take your yarn, go over the warp thread, under and around, over the warp thread, under and around. And I'm moving over one and kind of pulling on them so that the stitches pull the warps together. So I'm going over one warp from the right to the left and up, and over warp right to left, creating loops over the warp threads. And I'll do that all the way across. When you made it across with sumac, cut another length of yarn that will go across the warp threads 3 times with some tail. And we're going to weave in plain weave across the entirety of the warp for 3 rows. And now you're going to do warp as weft, and we're going to do some twining. So bring it across 5 times, cut a length, and do twining across by folding your length in half, wrapping it around one of the warp threads, one underneath and one on top, to create a loop that loops around that far left warp thread. And now the yarn or warp that's on top here, the one that we're weaving with, is going to shift over and under one warp thread to the right, and then the one that's on top of the second warp thread under the third warp towards the right. And we'll do this all the way across, switching which thread goes underneath each time you go under a warp. And it can be helpful to put the threads on tapestry needles so that you can more easily grab them, especially with this fine of twine. It can be helpful to have something a little thicker to grab onto, and then you can pick a little bit more easily. And we're going to do 2 rows of twining. So we'll go across in one direction and then we'll come back in the other direction. Once you have the twining in place, weave 5 rows of plain weave with the wool yarn once again. And now we're ready to take the tapestry off of the loom. So unhook your loom from the table or whatever you're working on. And you're going to come in, I'm going to do the top first. So I'll come in, move my loops out of the way, and I'm going to trim the warp so that I have about 3 inches of tail here so that I can tie the ends. So I'll cut across the warps like this, cutting it off the loom. This is a little bit nerve-wracking, so don't feel bad if you're stressing over this. And then you don't want to lose any of your threads, so try to make sure nothing's caught anywhere. Move things out of your way and tie 2 warp threads together. So I'm going to pull from the end here and tie in a square knot. So I'm loosely packing down the rows here. And this is going to be slow work because you want to make sure you catch 2 threads at a time, and that you're not packing too tight, but you're packing pretty even across the top of the warp. And if you get 2 on the outside done, then come to the other side of your tapestry and do 2 on this end as well. This will help to hold your warp in place as you're tying so that it doesn't get tangled up as you're working. And you'll do this tying in square knots all the way across the top here, and then trim down the bottom edge of your tapestry here, and do the same thing, trying to make sure that you lay out the tapestry and the warp threads lay flat in your tapestry before you tie them. All the ends are cut and tied on my tapestry now, and I've gone through and started to tie off some of the, or most of my ends. I wanted to show you a few options. You can come in with the tapestry needle, thread it with your ends like this tail that's sticking out of my circle from where I ended or started. And now I'm going to weave the end or thread it up into the cloth, and I'm on the back side. Send it up into the cloth a ways without pulling too tight, and then trim the end flush with the fabric, and now the end is hidden. And I'll do the same thing with this end, and I'm trying to catch loops that are going over a warp thread. So here I've got a warp thread and there's some loops I'm going to thread up and through. And then trim the excess away. If you have ends like these 2 that are close together, you can come in and do a square knot. Make sure you pull tight but not too tight, and then you can trim the ends like so. And this works well on a solid area where the ends are the same color because it kind of hides in there. Here's another end I will weave in. The ideal location to weave in your threads is in an area that is the same color so that it doesn't poke through and show in a different color. So if you find a section that's the same color to weave through, then any ends or pieces that stick out will disappear in the overall color. Now on the edges you can do the same, where you come in and you tie 2 pieces together so that they tie to the back side. The edges, if it was the same color, I did this one where I tied the 2 ends together because it could hide. But typically you want to come in with your tapestry needle and bring the side that is the yarn that's coming to the front, bring it to the front and weave it into the structure. And I'm just going to catch this outer edge here, pull through, and allow that loop to sit in the edge as flush as possible, and then trim this down flush with that color and let the end hide in the structure of the fabric. And then the same thing with these two as well. Bring them to the front. And the pieces that are coming over this warp thread and back to the back side, you'll do the same thing to the back of the tapestry. Flush to the front like that. And I'll do the same thing with this green piece. You can go in at an angle like this if you want. Just make sure it lands in the area of color where it should be. And then you can check for other ends. These ones here on the side, because I'm going to turn the header, I'm going to cut the yarn flush with the side. And then my tails of my fringe here, I'm going to cut short because this section is going to get folded to the back. So I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch tail. And I'll do this on the other end as well. Now we'll come to the back side and fold up this edge so that the sumac edge here is the border of the tapestry. And you can come in with sewing thread or warp thread, and I'm going to use my warp twine. Cut a length that's longer than the width of your tapestry and grab a needle. Stitches from the wrong side, and I'm going to come in right on this twining that I did with the warp. I'm going to come in, tie a knot with the end. You're going to fold it over and look to the front so that you can see where you're stitching and pull tight enough that the thread disappears. I'm going to come in and stitch across the bottom to tack my header to the back side. Do small stitches on the front, and you can take bigger stitches on the back so that it starts to look like this. You can't even see it from the back because it's the same color. The goal is to get the thread on the front to hide. And there's that edge folded and stitched. To finish off your yarn, grab a loop of the weaving and send your needle through the loop. And do the same thing again. Send your needle through a loop of the weaving and then through the loop that's created and pull tight. And that will create a nice little cinch knot, and then you can extend the thread into the weaving to weave it the ends in. And now I'll do the same thing to the top, folding this over and stitching it to the back. Here's my completed tapestry. You can see I tacked down both ends. It's finished and ready to hang. Now I have to come up with the hanging system. You can see in my tapestry, my sides ended up being pretty wonky. The shapes that you work in have a tendency to pull in your sides, and I went really high on the tension as I was weaving through these sections. So this larger area of plain weave is a lot wider than my smaller areas of color, and then ended up bowing out with the diagonals and coming back in and straightening out more so with my circle. But here's our design. You can see the comparison of the two. So in the videos, we went over plain weave, how to create angles, how to do curves and use a interlock weave technique, interlock weave and stair step in diagonals, and then how to create shapes like this circle and do a background. When you're working on the PVC pipe loom, you will be struggling with tension of your warp and the distance between your warps, keeping them nice and separated. If your beam chain shifts on you like it did for me, then your warps will start to move closer or further apart, which could cause some issues like in here where it ended up being really tight in certain areas in my weaving. With your tapestry completed and a toolbox full of new techniques to work in tapestry, I hope you explore something else. Maybe take a break because this was a long series in tapestry weaving. Explore using these techniques in different designs. Some design of your own will be awesome. Be sure to check back next week. I'll be doing a short video on how to hang your tapestries, get them set up. This one we did the header tacked behind. You can do fringe instead and leave the fringed edge that you tied and just cut that evenly across and use the upper pieces to tie around a stick or branch or something to hang your piece if you want to do that. So there are options leaving the fringe on. Thanks so much for joining me for this tapestry weaving course. Check the description below for all of the resources and videos in this series, and until next week, happy weaving. See you next time. Bye.